Hi folks, thanks for joining me. My name's Ellie Fisher of Elka Textiles, and in this short tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to dress one of our small frame weaving looms. Now, to dress a loom simply means to prepare a loom for weaving, and so using the warp yarn that's included in our weaving starter kit, we're going to pop that onto the loom, and we're also going to be using one of these rotating heddle bars. Now, you have the option of using one of these or not. And regardless of what your preference is, it is really useful to know how to warp the loom with one, because when you're weaving multiple picks of something, it can really speed the process up. So let's crack on. This is one of our weaving starter kits in the natural colourway. The only things we need out of the kit for this tutorial are the heddle bar, the warp yarn and the loom. If you have one of our starter kits, open up the packet labelled Weaving Tools and remove the heddle bar. You'll also need a pair of scissors, and depending on the surface you're working on, some blue tack can be useful too. These looms have handy rotating heddle bars at the top and the bottom, so you can easily adjust your warp tension. Before we start, you'll need to check that they're nice and firmly screwed into position, with the overhang of teeth pointing straight up on the top bar and down on the bottom bar. I find a blob of blue tack on each corner of the loom useful for keeping it from sliding around while putting the warp on. Now take your heddle bar and place it around a third of the way down from the top of your frame. Tilt it away from you and notice the shorter and longer slits. Now take your warp yarn and, if you have one of these cakes, always try and take the end from the middle, as this will help prevent it from tangling. Take the end and tie it around the first peg at the bottom and secure with a double knot. I'm right-handed and find it easiest to warp from right to left, but you must do whichever feels most natural to you. This close-up image of the top of the loom shows you what we're aiming for. With the exception of the first and last slits on the top and bottom bars, you want 2 warp ends in each slit, whereas you want 1 warp end in each slit of the heddle bar, always using one length of slit, either long or short, for the way up, and the opposite for the way down. So, for example, if you've used a short slit on the way up, you will put the warp yarn through a long slit on the way down. Now, keeping a nice firm tension, lead the warp yarn up through the first slit on the heddle bar. This may be a short or a long slit. Mine is short. Through the first slit at the top of the loom, round the first peg, and then back down through the second slit on the heddle bar. Mine's long. And then through the second slit at the bottom. Wrap around the second peg and then lead the yarn back up through the third slit on the heddle bar. Now, as you come back to the top bar, you're going to place the warp yarn into the same slit as the previous one. Then wrap around the next peg, bringing it down through the next slit on the heddle bar and in to share a slit at the bottom. Continue like this over the entire width of the loom, making sure you have 2 warp ends in each slit at the top and bottom, and just 1 warp end in each slit of the heddle bar, using one length for the way up and the opposite for the way down. As you come to your final down, wrap the warp yarn around the last peg a couple of times to secure it in place before cutting it, leaving a generous few inches of tail. Tie the tail onto the final warp end, securing it with a double knot, which you can wiggle down to sit on the bottom bar or nestled into a slit. Not essential, but I like to add a piece of thin cardboard about 2 inches deep to the bottom of the warp. You can do this by twisting the heddle bar forwards or backwards to separate the warp. This gap is called the shed. You then insert the card into the gap and wiggle it down to the bottom of the loom, returning the heddle bar to a neutral position, meaning all the warp ends are sitting at the same height. This card not only gives you a nice straight base from which to start your weaving, it also forces you to leave enough bare warp to easily finish your piece. The next stage is to add a row of twining. This is a technique to secure your weaving in place when you come to taking it off the loom. Using your warp yarn, measure out and cut a length around 3 times the width of your warp. Double the yarn over and tuck one end under the first warp, lying both tails over the width of the warp. Take the top tail and twist it over the bottom tail. Then tuck the tail that's now on the top underneath the second warp. Now twist the top over bottom again, tucking the top tail under the third warp. Twist and tuck under the fourth. Twist, tuck under the fifth. Twist, tuck under the sixth. Twist, tuck under the seventh. Continue this twisting and tucking technique all the way over the entire width of the warp until you reach the far side. After you tuck the tail under the last warp, give the tails a final twist. Taking the tail that emerges from over the top of the final warp, weave it under then over several warp ends to tidy it away before cutting it a little shorter. Then do the same with the tail emerging from under the final warp, but this time weave it over then under several warp ends. Using a beater, if you have our weaving starter kit, this will be a vintage silver fork, and draw the row of twining down to sit on top of the cardboard base. You're now ready to start weaving. So well done, folks. I hope this video has been useful for you in helping you set up your loom and getting this heddle bar onto the loom and working. These looms are available on their own on our website. They're also available as part of our weaving starter kits, which are available in 9 different colourways. But they're also available with our online courses. So with our online courses, you have the option of buying them with or without a weaving starter kit. And we have an introduction to frame loom weaving, which is covering all the basics, all of the terminology you need, all of the basics, and a couple of different techniques. We then have our comprehensive guide to becoming a weaver, and that covers absolutely everything you need to know to become a confident weaver. And you also then gain access to a Facebook support group, which is a community of people all enrolled on the same course as you, and you can ask for advice, and you'll get direct advice back from me and from the other students who are on the course as well, which is really nice. And it's just nice to be able to share your work in that sort of environment where everybody's at the same stage as you. So yeah, if you're interested in the courses, head to the description of this video and I'll pop some links in there for you. Cheers then, bye bye.